All right, folks, gather round. Today we're diving into the thrilling world of statistics. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Statistics? On a Friday night? Someone get me another beer. But hold on, this ain't your high school math class. This is about a statistical showdown, a clash of titans, well, you get the picture. We're talking about a guy named Carl Pearson, a man who took the world of statistics by storm and left it forever changed.
Now, Karl Pearson, he was a real piece of work. Smart as a whip, mind like a steel trap. But bless his heart, he couldn't stand the thought of causality.
Chuckles. That's right, folks. Pearson, the statistical genius, had a bone to pick with the very idea of cause and effect. See, Pearson believed that statistics should only deal with what you could see, what you could measure. No room for fuzzy concepts like why or because. He was all about the numbers, the cold, hard data, and to him, that meant no meddling with causality. Now you might be thinking, what's the big deal with causality anyway? Well, it turns out that causality, that little idea that one thing can cause another, is kinda important. It's how we make sense of the world, how we learn from our mistakes, how we avoid getting hit by buses. But Pearson, he wasn't convinced. He thought that chasing after causality was a fool's errand, a distraction from the real work of statistics. And so, armed with his trusty equations and a healthy dose of skepticism, Carl Pearson set out to revolutionize the world of statistics, leaving a trail of bewildered mathematicians in his wake. Let's rewind the clock a bit, back to the year 1857. Picture London, England. Queen Victoria's on the throne, Charles Dickens is topping the bestseller lists, and a young Carl Pearson is just entering the world. Born into a family of lawyers, young Carl seemed destined for a life of legal briefs and courtroom drama. But fate, it seems, had other plans. You see, Carl was a curious kid, a real whiz kid. He loved math, physics, even dabbled in a little philosophy on the side. This wasn't your average run-of-the-mill curiosity. Pearson was the kind of guy who'd stay up all night, wrestling with complex equations, trying to unlock the secrets of the universe.
Now y'all know how it is. Smart young fella like Carl, he was destined for greatness. And where else do smart young fellas go to make their mark? That's right, Cambridge University.
And so, off to Cambridge our young scholar went, eager to soak up all the knowledge he could. He dove headfirst into the world of academia, studying mathematics, physics, and even German history and literature. This guy was like a sponge, absorbing information like it was going out of style. But it wasn't enough to just learn the facts. Pearson wanted to understand the why, the underlying principles that governed the world around him. He was on a quest for knowledge, a one-man mission to unravel the mysteries of the universe. And little did he know, this quest would lead him down a path to become a statistical revolutionary. Now you might be thinking, hold on a minute, statistics, that doesn't sound very revolutionary. But trust me folks, Pearson was about to turn the world of statistics on its head. See, back in the late 19th century, statistics was still a pretty young science. It was mostly used for things like collecting census data or tracking trade figures. Pretty dry stuff, right? But Pearson, he saw the potential for something more. He realized that statistics could be used to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. And so, with his trusty slide rule in hand, Pearson set out to develop new statistical methods that would change the way we see the world. He was like a statistical Indiana Jones venturing into uncharted territory searching for statistical treasures.
Now, one of Pearson's biggest contributions, the one that really got folks talking, was his work on correlation.
See, before Pearson came along, people had a hard time figuring out how to measure the relationship between two things. Sure, they could tell you if one thing was bigger or smaller than another, but how do you measure how much one thing changes in relation to another? Pearson cracked the code, folks. He developed a way to quantify the strength and direction of the relationship between two variables, something he called the correlation coefficient. This was a game changer. Suddenly, scientists and researchers had a powerful tool to explore the complex relationships between different phenomena. they could finally start to answer questions like, does smoking cause lung cancer? Or does education lead to higher income? Now, you might think that Pearson's groundbreaking work would have made him an instant hero in the world of academia. Well, not quite. You see, Pearson wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. He was a bit of a rebel, a statistical rock star who wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers. And boy, did he ruffle some feathers. His work on correlation, while groundbreaking, also sparked a heated debate about the nature of causality. Some folks embraced Pearson's ideas, recognizing the power of his methods. Others, however, weren't so keen on this whole correlation business. They argued that just because two things are correlated, it doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other. Little did they know, this debate would rage on for decades to come, shaping the future of statistics and leaving a lasting legacy on the field. Now, this whole correlation versus causation thing, it can be a real head-scratcher. It's like trying to figure out if the chicken or the egg came first.
Southern drawl. It's like my mama always used to say, just because two things happen at the same time, don't mean one caused the other. Could be just a coincidence or something else entirely.
Wise words from your mama, Speaker One. And Pearson, he was all about those wise words. He knew that correlation, while powerful, could be a tricky beast. See, just because two things are correlated, it doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the other. They could be related for some other reason entirely, or it could just be a random fluke, a statistical anomaly. And that's where Pearson really dug his heels in. He became convinced that the whole pursuit of causality was a fool's errand, a distraction from the real work of statistics. He argued that causality was too subjective, too open to interpretation. What one person sees as a clear cause and effect relationship, another might see as a mere coincidence.
Southern drawl. Pearson, he was a real stickler for objectivity. He wanted statistics to be pure, uncontaminated by human bias or speculation.
He believed that statisticians should stick to what they could observe and measure, leaving the why questions to the philosophers and theologians. Now I know what you're thinking. A world without why? That sounds awfully boring. And you're not wrong. But there was a certain appeal to Pearson's way of thinking. By focusing solely on observation and measurement, he believed that statisticians could achieve a level of objectivity and precision that was impossible when dealing with messy concepts like causality.
Southern drawl. It was all about keeping it clean, keeping it simple. No need to get bogged down in all that philosophical mumbo-jumbo.
And for a while, Pearson's ideas held sway. Statisticians became masters of observation, developing sophisticated methods for analyzing data and identifying patterns. But Pearson's crusade against causality didn't go unchallenged. In fact, it sparked one of the most epic battles in the history of statistics. In one corner, we had Pearson, the champion of pure observation. In the other corner, we had his arch-nemesis, Sir Francis Galton, a brilliant polymath and the father of eugenics.
Southern drawl. Now Galton, he was a real character, a bit eccentric some might say, but he had a knack for seeing patterns in the world around him.
Galton was convinced that heredity played a major role in shaping human traits and abilities, and he believed that statistics could be used to unlock the secrets of inheritance. But Pearson wasn't buying it. He argued that Galton's methods were flawed, his conclusions based on shaky statistical ground. The two men clashed in a series of increasingly acrimonious debates, their rivalry becoming the stuff of statistical legend. Now, in the end, Pearson's crusade against causality wouldn't completely win the day. The allure of understanding why proved too strong to resist. But his ideas left an indelible mark on the field of statistics. Even today, statisticians are taught to be wary of making causal claims, to distinguish between correlation and causation.
Southern drawl. Pearson's legacy is a reminder that statistics, powerful as it may be, has its limits. It can tell us what's happening, but it can't always tell us why.
And so, the debate rages on. But one thing's for sure. Karl Pearson's unwavering skepticism and his relentless pursuit of statistical rigor continue to shape the way we think about data and the stories it tells. Now Pearson, he wasn't just content with sitting in his ivory tower, scribbling away in his notebooks. He wanted to spread the gospel of statistical rigor far and wide. He was a gifted teacher, passionate and engaging, even if his ideas sometimes ruffled some feathers. And boy, did he have some influential students.
Southern drawl. Oh, Pearson, he was like a statistical Pied Piper, drawing in bright young minds from all over.
These weren't just any students. These were the future giants of statistics, folks, the ones who would go on to shape the field for generations to come. We're talking about folks like Ronald Fisher, the statistical mastermind who revolutionized experimental design, and Jerzy Neyman, the Polish mathematician who developed the theory of hypothesis testing. These guys were heavy hitters, and they all learned from the master himself, Carl Pearson. Now, under Pearson's influence, the world of statistics underwent a major transformation. It was out with the old, descriptive statistics and in with the new inferential statistics.
Southern drawl. Folks weren't just content with describing data anymore. They wanted to use it to make predictions, to test hypotheses, to draw conclusions about the world around them.
And one of the key tools that emerged from this statistical revolution was the concept of statistical significance. This was a way of quantifying how likely it was that an observed result was due to chance alone. If the probability was low enough, typically less than 5%, then the result was deemed statistically significant. It was a simple idea, but it had a profound impact. Suddenly, scientists had a way to separate the signal from the noise, to identify findings that were unlikely to be just a fluke. Now, this whole p-value thing, it was a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it gave scientists a powerful tool for evaluating evidence. No longer did they have to rely on gut feeling or subjective interpretation. They had hard numbers to back up their claims.
Southern drawl. It was like having a statistical lie detector, a way to separate the truth from the hogwash.
But on the other hand, p-values could be easily misused and misinterpreted. Scientists, eager to publish their findings and advance their careers, started to treat p-values like a magical threshold. If the p-value was less than 0.05, then their results were significant, worthy of publication and celebration. If it was above 0.05, well, then their research was relegated to the dustbin of scientific history. And so, in this brave new world of statistical significance, observational studies became all the rage. Scientists, armed with their trusty p-values, set out to uncover correlations between all sorts of variables.
Southern drawl. It was like a statistical gold rush, with researchers panning for correlations in every dataset they could get their hands on.
They found correlations between smoking and lung cancer, between diet and heart disease, between education and income. And with each new correlation, the headline screamed, "Scientists discover link between X and Y." But amidst all the excitement, Pearson's ghost was still lurking in the background. Remember his warning about the dangers of mistaking correlation for causation? Well, it seemed that many scientists had forgotten, or perhaps chosen to ignore, his sage advice. Now, to be fair, not everyone had forgotten Pearson's warnings. There were still some statisticians who cautioned against over-interpreting observational studies, who reminded their colleagues that correlation does not equal causation.
Southern drawl. But it was like preaching to the choir. The allure of finding those statistically significant correlations, it was just too strong to resist.
And so, Pearson's ghost continued to haunt the halls of academia, a constant reminder of the pitfalls of statistical inference. His legacy lived on, not in the triumphant pronouncements of causal discoveries, but in the nagging doubts that lingered beneath the surface. It was a legacy of caution, of skepticism, of the importance of critical thinking in the face of seemingly compelling data. So was Carl Pearson a hero or a villain in the annals of statistical history?
Southern drawl. Well, that depends on who you ask. Some folks, they see him as a visionary, a pioneer who laid the foundation for modern statistics.
They admire his rigor, his insistence on objectivity, his unwavering commitment to the pursuit of statistical truth.
Southern drawl. Others, they see him as a bit of a killjoy, a stick in the mud who held back the progress of science with his skepticism about causality.
They argue that his influence led to a culture of excessive caution, a reluctance to embrace the full potential of statistical inference. But love him or hate him, there's no denying that Carl Pearson left an indelible mark on the field of statistics. His ideas continue to shape the way we think about data, the way we design studies, the way we interpret results. And as long as we strive to use statistics to understand the world around us, his legacy will continue to be debated, dissected, and yes, even celebrated. Now you might think that after Pearson's statistical smackdown, the whole causality thing would just fade into the background, a statistical footnote lost to the sands of time.
Southern drawl. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, a new generation of statisticians emerged, ready to challenge the orthodoxy, to pick up the causal gauntlet that Pearson had thrown down.
These weren't your grandpappy statisticians, content with just crunching numbers and calculating p-values. These were rebels with a cause, mavericks who dared to ask the forbidden question, why? They saw the limitations of a purely observational approach, the frustration of knowing that two things were correlated but not being able to say why, and they were determined to find a way to bring causality back into the statistical fold. And leading the charge was a charismatic Israeli-American computer scientist and statistician named Judea Pearl.
Southern drawl. Now Judea, he was a real firecracker, a force of nature. He wasn't afraid to shake things up, to challenge the statistical establishment.
Pearl had a vision of a world where statisticians wouldn't shy away from causality, but would embrace it, develop new tools and methods to unravel the causal web of the universe. He argued that while Pearson was right to be wary of mistaking correlation for causation, he had gone too far in banishing causality from statistics altogether. Pearl believed that causality was not some mystical force beyond the reach of scientific inquiry. It was a fundamental aspect of reality, one that could be studied, modeled, and even quantified. And so, armed with his trusty DAGs, that's directed acyclic graphs for you non-statisticians, and his powerful do calculus, Pearl set out to revolutionize the way we think about causality.
Southern drawl. Now I don't rightly know what a DAG is or how to do that there do calculus. But let me tell you, it sounded mighty impressive.
Pearl's work was groundbreaking. He showed how we could use graphical models to represent causal relationships, how we could identify potential confounders that might be masking true causal effects. He developed methods for estimating causal effects even in the absence of randomized controlled trials, the gold standard for causal inference, but often impossible to conduct in the real world. Pearl's ideas were like a breath of fresh air in a statistical world that had become stale and stifled. He was opening up new avenues of inquiry, giving scientists the tools they needed to tackle some of the most challenging questions facing humanity. Now, Pearl's work wasn't without its critics. Some argued that his methods were too complex, too reliant on assumptions that couldn't always be met in practice. Others worried that his work would lead to a resurgence of causal claims based on flimsy evidence.
Southern drawl. It was like the statistical world was having a collective identity crisis. Are we allowed to talk about causality now, they wondered, or is that still taboo?
But despite the controversy, Pearl's ideas slowly began to take root. More and more statisticians, particularly those working in fields like epidemiology, economics, and social science, recognized the power of his approach. And as the field of data science exploded in the 21st century, Pearl's work took on even greater significance. With massive data sets and powerful computers at their disposal, data scientists were no longer content with just finding patterns in the data. They wanted to understand the underlying causal mechanisms, to build models that could predict the effects of interventions and make a real-world impact. So where does this leave Carl Pearson, the statistical giant who so vehemently opposed the pursuit of causality?
Southern drawl. Well, Pearson's legacy is a complex one. He was a brilliant statistician, no doubt about it. His contributions to the field are undeniable.
But his insistence on separating correlation from causation, while well-intentioned, ultimately proved to be a roadblock to scientific progress. In the age of big data, when we have more information at our fingertips than ever before, it's more important than ever to understand the causal relationships between variables, to move beyond simple correlations, and uncover the underlying mechanisms that drive the world around us. And so, as we venture further into this brave new world of data-driven discovery, we owe a debt of gratitude to both Carl Pearson and Judea Pearl.
Southern drawl. To Pearson for his rigor, his skepticism, his insistence on statistical integrity, and to Perel for his vision, his boldness, his unwavering belief in the power of causality.
Together they remind us that the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing journey, one that requires both caution and courage, skepticism and imagination. And as long as we continue to ask the big questions, to challenge the status quo, and to embrace the power of data, the legacy of these two statistical titans will continue to shape the world around us. So, there you have it, folks. The story of Carl Pearson, the statistical titan who waged war on causality, leaving a legacy as complex and multifaceted as a statistical equation scrawled across a blackboard.
Southern drawl. It's a real head-scratcher, ain't it? This fella Pearson, he was brilliant, no doubt about it. But his ideas about causality, well, they stirred up a right hornet's nest.
Pearson's paradox, if you will, is that his fierce opposition to causal claims, while stemming from a desire for statistical rigor, ended up hindering the very progress he sought to promote. By drawing such a hard line in the statistical sand, he inadvertently created a climate of fear, a reluctance to even ask the why questions that drive scientific inquiry. But let's not be too hard on old Carl. In this age of big data, where we're bombarded with statistics on a daily basis, his emphasis on skepticism and careful interpretation is more relevant than ever.
Southern drawl. Y'all know how it is. One minute the headlines are screaming that chocolate's a health food, the next minute it's gonna give you heart palpitations.
We're constantly being told that studies show this or data proves that, but how often do we stop to question the methods, the assumptions, the potential biases lurking beneath the surface? Pearson's legacy serves as a timely reminder that statistics, while a powerful tool for understanding the world, is not a magic bullet. It's up to us, the consumers of this statistical deluge, to be critical thinkers, to demand transparency, and to remember that correlation does not equal causation. But Pearson's story also teaches us that statistics is more than just a dry, technical field, devoid of human emotion or philosophical debate.
Southern drawl. Behind all those numbers, those equations, those p-values, there are real people, grappling with real-world problems, trying to make sense of the complexities of human existence.
The questions we ask, the data we collect, the methods we use to analyze that data, these are all shaped by our values, our beliefs, our understanding of the world. And the conclusions we draw from our statistical analyses have real-world implications, influencing policy decisions, shaping public opinion, and even impacting individual lives. So, let's not forget the human element in all of this. The importance of empathy, ethical considerations, and the recognition that statistics is not just about numbers, but about people. As we stand on the precipice of a new era in statistics, an era of unprecedented computational power and access to data, it's tempting to think that we've finally transcended the limitations of Pearson's time.
Southern drawl. With our fancy algorithms and our machine learning, surely we've got this whole causality thing figured out by now, right?
Chuckles. Well, not so fast. The truth is, the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. The world is a messy, complex place, and our statistical models, no matter how sophisticated, will always be just that, models. But that doesn't mean we should give up on the quest for understanding. On the contrary, it's more important than ever that we continue to push the boundaries of statistical inference, to develop new methods, to ask new questions, and to embrace the complexity of the world around us. And as we do so, let us remember the lessons of Carl Pearson, both the good and the bad. Let us be rigorous in our methods, skeptical of easy answers, and always mindful of the limitations of our tools. But let us also be bold in our thinking, willing to challenge the status quo and never afraid to ask the why.